Okay, so
We're like
should
in
be
our assigned seat.
going.
Can
Can everyone hear us online?
Yeah, you say
Give us a
here.
thumbs up or if you can.
I think they're in the same places. Yes, human beings are so funny.
Yeah, this is the one, normally used to have in the computer screen, so I have the preview of the next slide.
Oh,
So I
yeah,
don't
so,
get, so I'll have to, I know it well enough, I can,
okay, and I'll turn on the presentation mode so everyone at home sees what you're talking about.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, all right, but yeah, so John, you're the wildlife manager for Three Rivers Park District,
Yes.
is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
And you have been flying, how many years now is it that you've been flying the Eagle route for?
at least since 2004, it might have been before that too.
Okay.
We started doing it when Bill Rowdy out of the Ashland office was doing the chemical study and looking for DDT and other contaminants in the eagles. So I was checking for the nests before they would come in with the climbers.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for making the trek in the
Yeah.
snow and stuff like that.
No
So,
problem. I think since it seems to be a fairly relaxed, I think I will stay seated too. And I don't know,
I can monitor the chat. and
Okay.
stuff like that. For
I was just gonna say the camera, but
Oh,
I don't need to be on screen, so that's fine. So what I'm gonna do today is just talk about eagle nest surveys in the mid corridor. And I, like said in the introduction, I've been doing these probably since the early 2000s. First officially for the Park Service and now for the Friends, because there's some issue about the Park Service paying for helicopters that they didn't have. And since there's no National Park Service helicopters in Minnesota, we couldn't do that. So we kind of worked with the Friends group, which is really good. But what we do is twice a year, fly the corridor and look. The April survey, we look for occupied nests, so where the birds are nesting, similar to what's on the title slide here. And then we'll go back in June to count the number of chicks. So we get a production of how many birds there are out there. And what we fly is apologize for the quality, but we get a number of maps that are made out of the Ashland office. And then we kind of, as we fly down the river, all the eagle nests are located on individual maps. So this would be the north end. And is there a way of pointing? No, as far as, so they, oh, yeah. So,
Go up. There you go.
okay. So right here is the mouth of the Crow River, which is where we really start. And the first eagle nest is just upstream a little bit. And then on the maps, I've added these green areas. These are going to be the heron rookeries that we see along the tour down the river. And I'm going to talk about that at the end because I have some concerns about the health, more on the health of heron nests than eagle nests in this part of the river right now. But all the blue dots are the recent occupied nests from the year before. So this is actually the nests that were occupied in 2021 that we went out and looked at. The orange dots and the yellow dots are older nests, a lot of historic nests. Eagles tend to change where they nest from year to year. Sometimes they actually will have two nests. They use one for a year or two, switch back to the old nest. It's kind of like us in our lake cabins. And this is the upper stretch. This is the Rum River. So this is city of Anoka. So this is coming down. There aren't as many eagle nests in here. This is pretty well developed as far as manicured back lawns right up to the river. So you don't have as much green space. And further south, we'll see that they actually don't care about green space as much. Then we come down, this is the Coon Rapids Dam right here. And there's a small heron rookery. And then there's an eagle nest that wasn't active this year that moves around on the islands that are just downstream of the dam. Then there's these two dots here, which it's so on one little island, there's two nests. So as you fly down, this picture is taken from the bridge. And this is the island. This is called Danville Island. It's owned by the Isaac Walton League. So this is, as you're flying down, this is what you see. And now the eagle nest is now in view. and it's right there. Then you get closer and it's right there and you can see the white head. So that's the eagle. And that's all we need to see when we do the first count. Like, yep, there's an eagle on the nest and we move on down. When we go back in the summer to look for it, so in June, it looks a little different. And there are times where you can't find the nests. Some of them, once you're used to seeing it, I've looked at that nest on Banville Island for over 10 years. It's been a very long-term nest. Sometimes you can't find it under the leaf canopy, but what we do is when we look for production, it's the number of chicks per nest that we find the second time. So it's a much different look of the river. This was from a few years ago because there's actually water on both sides of this island. This summer, this channel on the west side of the island was actually dry. As we move down, we come down to, this is I-694, so this is right where Fridley and Brooklyn Center crosses. And this is Durham Island. Also has a couple of nests that have moved around on this island off and on since I started doing surveys. And they've been probably in 4 or 5 different locations. When you come down, this is one of the urban islands. This sits right in front of the building for the Minneapolis Waterworks. And I don't have a picture of it because the nest actually blew down this year. And then as you come down to the cities, this is the heron rookery that is right north of the river. So once again, green spaces aren't that important. This is backdrop of the heron rookery. As you get closer, you can see there's a lot of nests. This is a really healthy rookery. It's up to over 70 nests, I think, and it actually had great egret this year. Just one, but it did have some. And as you move down through downtown, I don't have any close-ups, but this is Highway 35W. And as you get onto the 35W bridge going south, and you're a passenger in the car, because you shouldn't do this if you're driving, and you look 90 degrees to your right, you're going to look right into an eagle nest. I mean, it's right there at the river. You can see it from the Guthrie deck if you look downstream. So it sits, there's a big metal building right there. And then you come down, there's also one that wasn't on this map because it was just finalized this year right at Fairview Hospital. Like you look out the 3rd floor window and you look into the eagle. So they aren't as concerned about being secretive.
Those are both active ones.
Both active. And then this is on somebody's backyard off of West River Road. It's in a white pine right in their backyard. And as you come down through downtown to the airport, this is where it gets really interesting. These are the 2 major runways that have planes coming and going about every 3 minutes. And this was an eagle nest that we wanted to look at. It failed a couple of years ago. The tree's now gone, but we would sit up closer to Fort Snelling and wait, and then the tower would say, you have 3 minutes, and you zip in and you look for the white head and you zip out. So I'm kind of glad that one's gone. But, and then as you come up, this is Crosby Farms, and then Lilydale is right here. And, number of eagle nests that are fairly close together. And some of these come ebb and flow depending on the year. Sometimes one of the big trees will fall into the river, but as long as the adults survive, they will rebuild their nest. This is probably one of the more interesting eagle nests. A little bit hard to see in this picture, but the eagle nest is right there.
Yeah.
And when you get a good look, it's right under so once again, green space, not that important. This eagle nest failed this year, and the best that I can tell is there was a dead eagle in that eagle nest.
Oh,
So the
really?
avian influenza,
Oh.
there were several nests along the route but how do you go check that? So, the hope is that there's a lot of surplus eagles in this stretch of the river, and these nests will get reused. This is the only nest I know of in the corridor that's on a man-made structure. Then as you come around the bend, This is downtown St. Paul. We're right about there. There's one nest. This one is now gone. This is up on top of the bluff. It was in somebody's backyard in a spruce tree over his garage. And it had been there for 10 years. And finally, the tree wasn't looking good. This yellow dot is the famous DNR Eagle Camp.
Oh, yeah.
It's right there. And then you get down into the Pig's Eye Peninsula and Pig's Eye Lake, and there's all kinds of eagles. And so the next slide shows, this is these two dots that are kind of touching each other, which eagles are not supposed to do. So this is nest, this RA07. This nest has been there for as long as I've been counting eagles. And then 2 years ago, this nest showed up. And they're not 100 yards apart. Eagles are not supposed to nest any closer than a mile apart. And they regularly nest closer than that in the corridor. And one thing is, this is right across the river from the St. Paul Airport. And so let's see if I can back up. So this is the St. Paul Airport, and here's the runway, and here's that eagle nest. And airports don't like eagles in their flight paths. Eagles, they don't like trees in their flight path. But if you put an eagle nest in a tree, they can't cut it down. They clear cut every tree around that tree.
Really?
And left that tree just sticking up there. But, and they throw human safety, human health, and then they do what they want to do. But they're still doing well. And as you come further down on the river, you get, a number of nests, and a number of them have been there a long time. And then as you get south of 494, so Pig's Eye is just on the north end of the stream, and you start to get down through Cottage Grove and Newport, you can see there's been eagles all through here. The blue are the active dots. The yellows are the recent dots, but not the previous year. And the orange are old nests that are gone. So, it could be that, this one blue dot actually was these three nests. And for a long time, Rebecca Key, who was the main data person out of Ashland that made all these maps for me every year, would try to keep territories together. So you'd have RA7, and if it moved across the river, it'd be RA7B. And there's just so many nests now that they just give everything a different name. This is the McAllister property right here. There's a couple of eagles on their site. So, just a lot of birds, and they seem to be doing quite well. And if you get down into the spring, this is Spring Lake. This is Gray Cloud Island. I think when it gets to be a regional park, it'll be the Gray Cloud Atoll, because it's just going to be a ring with a lake in it. And it's still very actively mined. They're actually now mining the river bottom to get sand. But all these, you start looking at all these little dots. So every little island that's out in that, outside the main channel, has eagle nests, and it gets hard to remember which is which. If you sent somebody that had not flown it multiple times, it would get really confusing, and I'll talk about that at the end. This yellow square, this nest is gone, but this was another interesting one in that this was the only eagle nest in a white pine, besides the one in the backyard up in Minneapolis. So all the nests are either in cottonwoods or silver maples. But this one was on, as you get down by Pine Bend, where the pine trees are, along that steep bluff along the river, you had scattered, large growth or older growth white pines. And so this was in one, and you can see it was nesting. It was a broken top, and it was nesting at the top of the lake. And we still kind of fly that every now and then to see if they're back in that nest site. So then you come back in, this was still Gray Cloud Island, but you can see all these nests and all these little points. Some of these islands are Army Corps islands where they use it for dumping their sand, which is now going up in the Pig's Eye Lake, which is good. And then a few over by the Chemlite plant. And then as you continue to go further down, this is Lock and Dam 2. And the area right around this is Lake Rebecca. And so there have been eagle nests coming and going out of there for a long time. We've actually taken off some of the old historic nest sites because there's a lot. But there's an island up here in the middle of the pool 2. And the island is actually smaller than that square. And it had one tree and it had an eagle nest on it. And then that one fell down and there's another little island just upstream of the dam that there's now an eagle nest. But they're just, scattered all over the place through here. This is Highway 61, this is Hastings, and there's an island by the marina with several nests in that one little island. And then you come down, you get into the DNR property, and this is Prescott, and this is Prescott Island. And this is where I stop when I do the surveys, just because you can only fly for a certain amount of time before you have to stop and refuel, and having to refuel more than twice to do an eagle survey adds a lot of time onto the plate. But the main reason is when you get down south of there, these are all orange because nobody surveyed for them in the last 15 years. This is the Vermilion River bottoms. And normally when you fly it in the spring, it's flooded. So you basically have 1,000 acres of treetops. And then there's an eagle nest. And it's like, well, where is that eagle nest in relation to the eagle nest? And it just is very confusing.
Yeah.
And, I flew that once, actually 1 year I flew all the way down to the Cannon River bottoms to Red Wing. We flew down to Lake City. And that took many stops at the airport. But it just gets so hard to kind of keep track, even with GPS and things like that. It's, it'd be easier now because I do carry an iPad, but when we were doing it, that was back at the beginning of the study. And the reason this one is blue down here is that's part of the Wisconsin survey area. And if you went up to St. Croix, we don't go up that way, but Wisconsin counts those. There's actually a couple nests just north of where this slide is. So, and it takes about 2.5 hours to go from the mouth of the Crow River to the mouth of the St. Croix. Depends on it. It's a little quicker in the spring. Last year was a little slower because we hadn't done it for 2 years. And there were a lot of nests that we were trying to find and realized that they had probably fallen down over the 2 years we hadn't been there. But, the number of birds were still there. So then what we do, so in 2022, we found 44 nests that were occupied in April, 26 nests that were empty, and there's always a number of empty nests. But 21 of the nests that had been there in the past, so those orange squares we couldn't find that I knew about in the past. When we flew the second time to get the occupancy, there were 13 of the 44 nests were empty. 10 I just couldn't find because they're in the canopy and I couldn't do a count, but of the 21 we found, there were 32 chicks. So 1.5 chicks per nest, which is a little bit low. Normally it's about 1.8, but there was still production in the nest. So it's, it's not the best year, but it wasn't a total wipeout from avian flu. Next thing, this is going through my files. I had records starting in 2008, and I worked for Ramsey County Parks from 97 to 2013. And so I started doing it then. So I think there might be a couple of years before that, and Rebecca would have that, or somebody up in Ashland would have the data. She changed jobs too. And then there were a couple of years where the Park Service flew. And so this is before 2012, Park Service paid for the helicopter. And from 2016 on, Katie paid for them to the Friends. And so these 3 years, Bill Rowdy actually flew this with a fixed wing plane that they got out of Voyagers. And having two experienced Eagle Nest surveyors, if you were in the back of a Cessna, you wouldn't see half these things. And so I don't have his numbers, so I just never had the time to do it. In 2017, we did have this 75 nests, which was amazing. It was a really good year. But if you look at the other years, the 44 we found this year is closer to that. We're not quite sure why that was such a high year.
Oh,
The other thing that we see a lot of, but I don't keep track of, is immature birds. There are lots and lots of immature birds to the point where you can have flocks of immature eagles flying around, which is really kind of neat. And you see all kinds of years. One year we had the pelicans were stopping over in Spring Lake, all those little islands and backwaters were just full of pelicans. And we'll get herons or bitterns every now and then, see a lot of red-tailed hawks. But the other thing we see a lot of are the herons. And what brought that up is this is a map I made for a friend of mine who was concerned. So along within Mernra, there's the River Road one that's the one up by Dayton that I mentioned at the beginning. Mississippi Gateway Park, which is what we now call Coon Rapids Dam. It's there was a political thing. Coon Rapids is in another county. We're Hennepin County, so we're not going to use Coon Rapids name. So they changed it to Mississippi Gateway. They thought it sounded better. But you would think the gateway would be up at the beginning of the Mississippi. The Lowry Bridge Island. Then you get down Pig's Eye SNA. It was made in SNA back in the early 80s because of the heron rookery that had over 1,000 nests of 4 species of birds. So it had great blue herons, great egrets, double-breasted cormorants, black-crowned night herons. And then this year, where those twin nests were on the little island closer to the treatment plant, there's this smaller colony that just started, which is probably a break off of the Pig's Eye colony. And then when you get down by Lock and Dam number 2 at Rebecca Lake, there's another smaller heron rookery. There's also another one down in the Dewar Bottoms area of the DNR property, which I did not fly over this year. So these are the different colonies. And this is kind of my summary, just to try to get somebody, because I sent this out. I said I flew over Pig's Eye, and I think at the first flight, I counted like less than 80 nests. And I sent it out, and there was one response, we were told it's okay. And it was from a volunteer that went out and saw herons on nests and didn't really know the magnitude of it. And then when we flew it the second time, there were a few more. And so the red numbers are from when I counted in the June flight, because I wanted to know what was there. So, the right count, or the one up at Dayton, is a medium-sized one. The Gateway is a small nest. Lowry Bridge is a good-sized nest, and it has 2 species. The Little Pig's Eye one was 30 nests, and that's new. It wasn't there last year. And then, the SNA one, which should be the biggest by far of any of the other nests, any of the other colonies, isn't really any bigger. Still has a higher percentage of great egrets, but it just doesn't have the numbers. And it's property is owned by Ramsey County, but it has an SNA easement over top of it by the DNR, and it falls within Minra Quarter. I, as an individual that works for Three Rivers Park District that is way over to the west, can only nudge and cajole and encourage you guys to send a letter to the DNR to say, are you going to do an inspection of this SNA? Because something's happening there. And, there was another SNA up near St. Cloud that was a big heron rookery, kind of like this. And as soon as they made it an SNA, the herons moved. And heron colonies do move. They're not permanent settings, but it's just to have such a big, healthy colony decline is something that I think somebody needs to take a better look at. And it's not my place to, like I say, tell anybody, but I can control We're gonna keep track of the one at Mississippi Gateway, because that is within our parks. And we have other smaller heron rookeries in some of our parks. And we have one that's actually growing quite a bit that's not near the river. It's out in Carver Park, and we're estimating it to be over 100 nests now of a mixture of great blues and great egrets. And it's on an island out in the big tamarack swamp. So it's kind of a neat place to be. So that's kind of the tour. If anybody has questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them. And if there's any in the chat, I would do that. But Mary, you go.
Do eagles eat the heron?
No, they normally don't. They'll harass the heron sometimes. But what the eagles will do, and I'm not zoomed in, the Dayton rookery and the Pig's Eye rookery have eagle nests in the rookeries. And I think what happens is the eagles come in, oh, look, somebody already started a nest for us. And they build on top of a heron nest.
Oh, really?
And the herons nest out on these little wimpy branches. So as soon as an eagle, it's like somebody having their bicycle parked somewhere. And you say, oh, I can go park my car next to that bicycle. And then the sidewalk falls into the river. And that's kind of what happens. And then over time, they stay in the same vicinity, but they move their nest to, the crotch of a big cottonwood or something that can handle the nest. But,
In Pig's Eye,
mhm.
is there a certain county, you've mentioned it several times now, but I don't really know where is the best spot. I know it's Pig's Eye in general.
Yeah,
Is there
there's
something
two,
more specific?
to see it, there's two places. There's one is Red Rock Road,
Red Rock Road.
which is the industrial road that runs up, parallels Highway 61. And if you're only go there in the middle of the day during the week, because otherwise you're going to run into street racers. It's not the most pleasant place to be, but on the other side of the river in Dakota County, there's a park. I can't remember the name of the park. You pull up Google Earth.
Yeah. Which area
We want to go to, it's the north side it's right across from Pig's Eye on the Dakota County side.
Do you go like to the end of this Red Rock Road?
Yeah, there's a barge depot. That's why I want to bring up the
Okay.
map so we can see a little bit better. And so those both give you good view sites.
Okay.
The one that's easiestly viewed is the one by Lowry Bridge. The one at island number 1 is hard to see unless you walk down the railroad bridge.
Well, I'm thinking of viewing the eagles.
Oh,
not
yeah, then that would be from the park on
The Pig's Eye area.
yeah.
Okay.
The, like I said, I just can't remember it's a big difference when can we get this to project?
not on that computer. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's on with the people online and stuff, but I could pull up Google Maps on that one.
Yeah, so it's,
Oh,
yeah, so okay, so yeah, it's this park right here. So what's the name of that? Kaposia Park, Kaposia Landing.
Oh, okay.
So, and there is a trail that goes, so if you're right, there's benches right along the river. And so that would be for viewing the eagles, and you can see the herons coming and going. That
It's
would be the
Kaposia Landing.
Kaposia Landing.
And Red Rock was more of a focus on the herons then?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and that's a very industrial
Okay.
section. You kind of get off in Newport and you wind up past the old steel plant. You go between the grain trucks and
So I'll go with Kaposia.
yeah, go with Kaposia. The other thing that's happening in Pig's Eye, and I guess you guys probably hopefully the county's they've been building islands.
Right.
And that was kind of a fun thing. I brought that up to the Army Corps 15 years ago. I said, well, we'll put it on our list. And it took them 12 years to get it to the top of their list. And then there was a group of concerned citizens.
Yeah. I remember that.
Oh, you're going to bring lousy contaminated soil into Pig's Eye Lake. It's like, nothing is more contaminated than the soil that's already in Pig's Eye. Oh, you're going to disrupt the wildlife. No, we're building the islands. And it's just, everything you tried to do, they tried to get me on the committee to help them. And it's like, I'm the one that requested these islands in Big Eye Lake, so no, I'm not gonna help you. You know, oh, it's gonna disturb the herons. Well, once again, if you could look at a map, you have the largest rail yard in the metro with 2 highways and a that Big Eye Island is normally surrounded by barges. It's like, how is this gonna disturb the herons if they've survived all these other things? So, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, you want to involve the public, but sometimes you spend a lot of time educating the public that you were involved with. But no, it's been fun. And, you know, like I said, you know, as long as the friends want to pay for it, we'll fly it again this year. It's the only time I get to fly. I don't get to fly deer surveys anymore. So that's my helicopter trips for the year, doing this.
We have a few questions in the chat. So Terry is asking about there's another man-made structure that they're pointing out. So it's over at the Fred Wells Tennis Center parking lot, just north of the airport.
Okay.
I guess that's out of the Minra corridor, I would assume.
Yeah, we don't get is it an eagle nest or is it an osprey nest?
Not sure. They don't. I'm guessing it's probably just. They say eagle's nest on there. So
Okay, because normally on light structures like that, there are osprey nests.
okay.
And ospreys are a big bird also. Actually, ospreys use man-made structures
Yeah, a
a
lot,
lot.
yeah.
So I guess it'd be worth checking, but my guess is it might be an osprey. But we'll actually check into it because Three Rivers tries to monitor all the osprey nests in the metro and provide the information. There's another organization out there that's a one-person organization that monitors osprey nests, but she doesn't share any of her data. We try to provide ours to anybody that wants to use it. So we'll check. So the tennis, so right by the base camp, right behind base camp, I assume.
Yeah, they said it's 100% eagle's nest. So.
Okay, we'll check.
And then Len had 2 questions. I don't know if you want to, if you could speak, Len, or type them into the chat, let me know, or feel free to come off of mute and relay those if you can. If not, type it out into the chat and we can ask.
Is there a question or what do you think?
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question. So you mentioned at the beginning that there were eagles that were kind of going back and forth between different nests or, you know,
Yep.
rotating. Are you tracking the individuals too?
No,
How are you?
it's like on some of these islands, there's 2 nests.
Mhm,
And 1 year there's an eagles nesting on this side, and the next year the eagles are nesting on that side.
mhm.
We're just assume it's the same pair on territories, but you know, an adult eagle looks like an adult eagle, and unless they're banded, and trying to see a band from a helicopter is not something you can do. So the assumption, and you know, the Eagle Cam at the DNR office, they can tell when they've shifted pairs, and you know, about every 3 or 4 years, one of them is shifted. But you know, we're just looking at it as it's an active eagle nest within very close proximity to another eagle nest, and you know, they've been known to move back and forth. But no, the only banding that was done is when Bill Rowdy was doing his contaminant study.
Mhm.
They would ban the eagles that they did. And actually what that was good for is the eagles that are nesting right around Pig's Eye like to catch fish and then eat them on the runway. So the wildlife services were trapping eagles and moving them. And then they'd be able to tell if they returned.
They come back.
They also put radios on a couple of them. One of them flew up into central Manitoba. So they will move around quite a bit, but you know, big birds, they move. They will remove geese and ducks and pigeons and things like that from the runways in one technique, and then for eagles and snowy owls and things like that, they trap them and reload.
Tom Diamond, I see you have your hand up. Can you have a question or something to relay?
Sure, thank you. two things I was gonna mention, down at Big's Eye. If you go up Red Rock Road, if you go all the way to the end, and you park along the road there, that's parkland, there in the road. And, you can get out and there's a little bit of a boat ramp that goes down, and that's all parkland there. And if you walk along the shore to the west, down on the end, you usually can get a view of the rookery there.
Yeah.
Though
Oh,
putting a canoe in or something like that, that'll really give you a much better view of it. You can't see the rookery at Pig's Eye Island from South St. Paul.
no,
It's
but
on
you
the-
see the birds flying in and out. I mean, I agree you can get to the end of Red Rock Road, but it's not, I would not steer somebody who is not a serious person that really wants to see the rookery to drive up that road. You know, luckily I haven't had to drive up it in the last 10 years because I changed jobs, but I didn't like driving up it even in a work vehicle. I mean, I know it's parkland at the end, but it's just, it wasn't a fun place to be.
It's also the lake and the along the road there, that's parkland, or most of it is parkland also there. And yes, you need to be a serious park visitor.
And
But also to mention, as far as dumping pollutant into the lake, that area unfortunately is the good part about it is Pig's Eye Lake is a glacial water body that was created before the Mississippi River even existed in St. Paul. It's and it was very deep water body. Unfortunately, with the Superfund, two Superfund sites and alongside it, it's been polluted heavily, and the material that's being brought in and dumped into the lake is heavily laden with PFAS because it's coming from down near the outlet of the Chemalite plant. And one of the concerns is the PFAS in there and its impact on the wildlife in the park, because there's already PFAS too high for above the limits, and the material coming in is above state and federal limits for the environment. So one of the things is, if you want good environment, you have to look at what you're providing habitat with the chemicals and the other stuff in there, how that affects the wildlife who lives there.
thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned that there were 40 of the Eagles Nest 44 were occupied, 21 were productive.
21, the one of the ones we found, 21, but there were 10 of the 44 that were occupied, there were 10 I couldn't relocate. So there were at least 21 that were productive,
And maybe 10 more.
maybe 10 more.
But then if we say that's 31 then,
Yeah.
so then there's 13. Can we assume that something happened to those eggs, or do you know what I'm trying to
Well,
ask?
either the eggs or the adults. I mean, because of the avian flu, there were
Oh,
nests where they were, you know, like I said, there was the one dead bird at Lilydale,
yeah.
and there was another nest down closer to Spring Lake that had a bird in it. That, you know, was definitely not moving. So, but once again, they're not areas that are easily climbed or
Yeah.
gotten into, so we never
What
did.
destroys the eagle eggs?
Cold weather, if they lay them too early and they're off the nest too long.
Oh,
There are raccoons can get up into nests.
Oh.
Raccoons will take them out. And so there's other things, chicks, if they have a young chick and the adults are away long enough, there's a number of, you know, great horned owls, raccoons, you know, there's a number of things that will take them. And, you know, once again, with most if every wildlife offspring survived, we'd be swimming in we'd be hiding from eagles. You could walk across the water from.
nobody would have little
Yeah,
dogs.
so
People.
What?
It'd be like people.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Hey, John,
One might argue more pleasant than people.
you had mentioned that in the wild eagle nests are like a mile apart. Are the occupied nests like further apart or how's?
that one I showed on the island right there by the tree,
Yeah.
those both were occupied. And so, no, and especially when you get down into Spring Lake where you have all the little channels,
Yeah,
you get eagle nests that are easily less than a mile apart.
is there a reason why in this area?
I think,
They look more tightly compacted?
I mean,
Differently, you know.
well, it's urbanization of eagles.
Okay,
It's like normally it's like, I wouldn't want to live with a house that's only 2 feet apart from somebody. And
yeah,
then you get used to doing it. The same with the eagles. And the one reason, there's so many eagles that are on the river through the winter. It's like, well, if I want a nest here,
oh, okay.
I'm going to have to put up with all these other eagles flying around. And I think it's just the density of birds makes it easier for them to.
The only reason I'm giggling at you right now, John, I used to work for the DNR over this would be almost 25 years ago. And one of my jobs is to locate public accesses.
Mhm.
We're working down at Wabasha at Lock and Dam 4, I think it is down there. Anyway, in the bottoms, there's an eagle nest, and I'm trying to put in a canoe route, a paddle route. And the wildlife people back then, I thought it was crazy, but now I hear you say it. And we're saying, wait, it's just paddle people, they're not going to disturb the nests. And he says, look in the Twin Cities, literally got eagles all over the place. And the wildlife ecologist goes, yeah, but those are urban eagles and these are wild eagles. And for me as a recreation person, I'm like, what?
That's interesting.
And, I think, if you go back even just 20 years ago, you had, during the spring, you needed to have like a half-mile buffer,
Right.
any activity,
Yes.
and then a quarter mile. And we had to deal with that because when I was with Ramsey County and Highway 61 at the north end of Keller Lake, there was an eagle nest that kind of sat right over the highway.
Yes.
And MnDOT replaced the bridge and we put a bike trail through.
Yeah, it's right underneath.
It's right under it. And we had to go through an incidental taking permit. It's like, and so as soon as I put the bike trail in, and the tree it was in was a terrible tree, they moved to the south end of the lake. So the eagles were still on the lake. They just weren't where that tree was. Then they moved back to that tree. So they're in a tree where this bike trail.
Yeah.
To go away. And I think,
Right under it.
having looked at that and looked at a lot of the literature on wolves and how you had to stay so far away from wolves, I think they're just getting used to people. And
Okay.
I think it's, if you were going to go and have a canoe route that went past an eagle nest on a little island, you probably wouldn't, and you just paddled past that little island, it's probably no big deal. But if you stop and camp on that island, you're going to probably, cause some grief. So I think that's part of things, but just paddling by and you look at the amount of recreation on the Mississippi River
Right.
and, they don't seem to care anymore. Or they've just got used to it. Yes.
I'm curious if you had thoughts about how heron rookeries or how they, I guess, interact with other birds like the egrets and the cormorants. They're kind of moving in, like the one that you call the Lowry Bridge one
Mhm.
at Marshall Terrace has been kind of like changing in composition.
No, if you go at Pig's Eye, you tend to you'll have a great blue heron community, which is mainly great blue heron nests, and the egret nests are a little bit further away, and there's a little bit of overlap. And then the cormorants were at Pig's Eye were kind of on the edge, and then the black-crowned night herons, which had basically disappeared from the state of Minnesota. It's next to not Pig's Eye. They would nest down in lower canopies, so you wouldn't see them from the air. You have to walk into the lake and the island and look up and look for them that way. So they're together, but it's not fully integrated. As far as, you don't have great blue heron, great egret, great blue heron, great egret, but they're using the same trees, and there doesn't seem to be any conflict that I know of. There was one colony that was up in Lino Lakes on Peltier Lake on an island. And it was a big, mainly great egrets with some great blue herons. And that one started to collapse. Nobody could figure it out. They put trail cameras up in the trees and it's raccoons
Oh,
that managed to get onto it. So then they went and started putting flashing around all the trees, but you have to do all the trees because as soon as the raccoons can get up in the canopy, then they go for tree picking.
wow.
And so they did trap it a little bit, but they were able to do that. And that was another, it was an island in a lake away from the river. But, and cormorants, that was the only place I know where they were mixed in with the herons in the metro. There's other areas they do, but normally cormorant colonies are cormorants.
Mm.
It's-
We got a few more in the chat. Len got back to us. He was wondering what the red and blue lines mean on the map.
So
I'm pretty sure the red one's the Monroe boundary. That
yeah, let me,
to go back, I think. Oh, it's not on present.
no,
Let me get back on.
so the red, is right, I was right, is the Monroe boundary. The blue is kind of the edge of the survey area.
Oh,
And then the purple is other property owners. So all the purple there is DNR property that the purple boundary is. So, but the red is the official MNRA legal boundary. And then we kind of gave a buffer outside of that. But actually, if we flew that whole buffer all the way up the river, this would be a 6-hour survey.
wow.
So normally we kind of fly the river and look out a little bit. If we get records of them being in that space, it's easier. And down here, it's not bad. You get off the river and it's all ag land, so it's easy. But up, kind of going through Minneapolis and up towards Maple Grove, that gets to be a big area to try to fly everybody's backyards.
The MNRA boundary, is that static or does that change sometimes?
It's pretty static. It's legal.
It's in legislation, so it would ordinarily change.
Yeah, so that's the external boundary. There are different sub-districts within it that
Mhm.
can change with, from a local city or county or something, changing some of that, but
But not
there's
the MNRA
minor,
sites.
pretty minor.
Okay.
I'm
changes.
just, this has nothing to do with Eagles. It just has to do with. So that's done. Okay, so, oops. So this is Dunham Island here. So this is 694. This is Brooklyn Center.
Yeah,
This in Brooklyn Park starts right about where this AN number is. So the municipal owners area that this island is actually Brooklyn Park. There's this little sliver that comes down and encompasses the island, but the island is owned by Anoka County because it's part of their regional park. So if you had to call somebody out there for an emergency, who do you call? Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, Anoka, 911 and let them figure it out. Dunham Island or Banville, where the Isaac Walton League is, it's their island. If you looked at the main channel of the river, it would put it on the west side of the main channel, which means it should be in Brooklyn Park. But if you look on the map, it's Fridley's. And they had And if you got in there and you saw that there was a dead eagle in the nest, there's not really a whole lot you could do with the drone. So, I mean, you could, not as fun as flying around in a helicopter. So it's one of those things that we haven't done. You know, you'd need a boat. If you wanted to do this using a drone, you would need a boat. You'd need to put the boat in and out of the river at least 4 times to get to those different sites.
Did you have any more on the chat?
No,
I have one.
we just
more.
bumped on mute by accident. We handed off the device.
You mentioned the eagle's nest that's down from the Guthrie.
Uh-huh.
Is that on the Guthrie side of the river? Or
It's on the other side,
Other
so
side?
it's
Okay.
on the north side of the river.
Yeah.
There's a big, I don't know if it's a steel plant or steel fabrication place, but these 3 big steel buildings that are kind of right at there. So, and it's in a big cottonwood, and it's almost eye level as you look off. You know,
Okay.
the best viewing would be is once again, if you're a passenger, get somebody
Oh,
to
on the
get
bridge.
on the bridge from 4th Street. So as you're coming down, so you're still on the ramp, and kind of right as that ramp ends is the best.
But it's in front of the bridge. Or it's on the other.
It's on the right-hand side of the bridge. So
Oh.
as you're going south, you just look to the right.
Okay.
But I remember when I moved to Minnesota many years ago, it took me a year to see, or more to see an eagle flying around in the Twin Cities. And now, if I don't see at least 1 or 2 eagles a day flying around the Twin Cities, I mean, out by my office at French Regional Park, in just driving to my office, there's 3 eagle nests that I can see.
Do a lot of them overwinter.
They overwinter not at their nests, but on the river. So as long as the river's open, they'll stay here. And so you will have it where you will get eagles that'll go back and visit. You know, you won't see them at the nest every day, but every now and then, you know, an eagle will be there. There's a nest just south of me. It's actually at the south end of Lake Owasso. And it's right on, almost overhanging a senior citizen housing. And I haven't seen them there. You know, I drive by it regularly. Normally you'll see them once or twice over the winter. And then starting March, they'll be there quite frequently.
But if it's a really cold winter and it freezes over most of the river, do we know how far south they'll go to try to reach
As
open water?
far as they have to, because without open water, there's not much to eat.
I mean,
And they
they'll go
will,
down-
they will scavenge. I mean, there are, not so much in the metro, but I mean, there are people that drag roadkill deer out onto the lakes to watch the eagles. So, you know, there will be some, but normally if it's frozen, you know, they don't hang around. So like if you were up in Voyagers, you know, they'd probably be shocked at this on eagle in the winter.
So
And they probably
they'll
aren't,
go as far as south as St. Louis as an example?
if they have to, but normally, I mean, the reason the National Eagle Center is where it is
Yeah.
because, you know, you had
You know,
the Chippewa River flows into the Mississippi and keeps
keep
that,
it open.
keeps it open.
Yeah.
And so that's where but,
Okay,
you know, the densities are just as good here as they are down there now.
okay.
I mean, you don't have to drive to Wabasha anymore to see eagles. I mean, I remember Audubon chapters would have bus trips down to Reed's Landing to go look at eagles in the fall.
Yeah.
And now they're all over the place.
I know there's a few open spots on the river further up by like Monticello where the power plant
Mhm.
and stuff. I wasn't sure if like stuff.
And that
More
probably,
things,
they'll hang up on those areas too. The problem you're gonna find is everybody thinks the river is open because of the nuke plant. River's open because of the coal plant. So once the coal plant shuts down, it's gonna really affect
Oh.
how much ice is on the river.
Do eagles prefer fish? Or
Yes.
Oh,
They're fish eaters for the most part, but they'll,
because of the fat in the fish or?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask somebody that's more an eagles expert. But I mean, they're part of the whole fish eagle
Okay,
group, whereas the golden eagles are more the mammal eaters.
okay. I didn't know that.
Looks like Tom raised his hand. Tom, if you want to
Quick.
come off mute, we have a few minutes left, so this will probably be the last one.
Sure. I just was going to mention that if looking for viewing eagles in the wintertime, the Metro Waste plant keeps the channel open between Pig's Eye 1 and the peninsula there. And DNR aerates the lake north of Warner Road there near the that one eagle nest with the by the DNR regional headquarters. And so there's eagles around there all winter long flying around. If you go into Pig's Eye Park, you will have a little trouble seeing eagles.
Is that the fishery?
The fish hatchery. So the regional office across the street.
Oh, yeah.
And that pond is one of the ponds they keep
Right.
their state fair
So it's
fish.
Eagle fast food.
Yep. And then the Pig's Eye Park is, Pig's Eye Lake, there's access, but once again, you have to know where you're going down in there because it's a big industrial site. It's not really, you're dodging cement trucks and log trucks, but that gets you closer to where the open water is.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. I think that's, if anyone's got any one last minute one, but if not, thank you for coming in and coming in the snow and everyone else for tuning
No
in.
problem.
So, and for flying around and counting the birds.
Oh,
for us.
that's fine.
All right, take care of it.
It was a great experience and Don is wonderful.